An oil change costs between $50 and $100 at most shops today. Replacing an engine costs between $2,000 and $10,000. Right now, in 2026, that engine replacement price is still going up. Parts have gotten more expensive. Labor has gotten more expensive. The driver who skips oil changes and then needs a major repair has always made a terrible trade. But today, that trade is the worst deal in the history of owning a car. Here's what most people get wrong about skipping oil changes. They think of it as a gamble, not a guarantee. They figure the engine has been fine so far and it will probably hold together a little longer. What they do not understand is how oil failure actually works inside a modern engine. It does not announce itself. It does not throw a warning light when the oil has turned to gel. It quietly attacks the smallest and most expensive components first, the ones nobody ever thinks about. And by the time those components fail, the repair bill is not a small one. Here is why this matters directly to your wallet in 2026, specifically. The numbers coming out of repair shops right now are not the same numbers that existed 5 years ago. A timing chain replacement averages between $1,500 and $3,000. A full brake job with rotor replacement runs over $1,900 for a set of 4. A head gasket repair costs up to $3,000. A transmission replacement runs between $2,500 and $5,000. An engine replacement starts at $2,000 and goes to $10,000 or higher depending on the vehicle. These are current prices with current labor rates, which average between $75 and $130 per hour, depending on the shop and the state you live in. That labor rate number has been climbing for 3 straight years, and the mechanics charging it are not apologizing for it. The cost of running a shop, the tools, the diagnostic equipment, the insurance, all of it has gone up, and the rate follows. The driver who skips oil changes is not just risking an engine. He is risking a bill that may total more than what the vehicle is worth on the used market. And that scenario is playing out in shops across the country right now, with vehicles that are 5, 7, and 10 years old. Most people think about oil changes in terms of keeping the engine lubricated. That is accurate, but it is not where the most expensive damage from skipped oil changes actually begins. The most expensive damage starts in components that most drivers never think about when they think about oil: the variable valve timing system, the timing chain tensioner, and the turbocharger oil feed line. Variable valve timing is now standard on virtually every modern gasoline engine sold in the United States. The system uses small actuators driven by oil pressure to adjust exactly when the engine valves open and close, which is how modern engines deliver both good fuel economy and strong power from the same design. Those actuators contain oil passages measured in fractions of a millimeter. When oil begins to thicken from extended use and develop sludge deposits from heat cycling, those passages restrict. The actuator stops responding correctly. The engine management system throws a fault code. But well before that fault code appears, the actuator has been slowly starving and wearing from restricted flow. A variable valve timing. Actuator replacement typically runs between $400 and $900 in parts alone before a single hour of labor is charged. The timing chain tensioner is a hydraulic component that holds the timing chain at the correct tension to keep the camshafts synchronized with the crankshaft. It runs on the same oil pressure as everything else. When oil is dirty and has lost its viscosity, the tensioner loses consistent pressure. The timing chain develops slack. Over thousands of miles, that slack causes wear on the chain guides and stretches the chain itself. In early stages, it produces a rattling noise at cold start that disappears after a few seconds as pressure builds. Most drivers ignore that noise. Eventually, the chain stretches enough to cause misfires, fault codes, and loss of power. A timing chain replacement is one of the most labor-intensive jobs a mechanic performs on a modern engine. The parts are not expensive, the hours required to access them are. The total bill runs $1,500 to $3,000, and on some European and Asian engines it runs higher. The turbocharger bearing depends on a continuous supply of clean oil at full pressure to keep a shaft spinning at speeds that can exceed 100,000 revolutions per minute. That shaft rides on a film of oil thinner than a human hair. Dirty oil with sludge deposits narrows the feed passages into the turbo housing and degrades the quality of that film. The bearing wears. When a turbocharger fails from oil neglect, the replacement cost ranges from $800 to several $1,000s depending on the vehicle. On some engines, a failing turbo sends metal debris downstream into the intake system and through the engine itself, turning a turbo replacement into a partial or full engine replacement. An engine built in the 1980s or early 1990s was designed with wide internal clearances. The pistons, the crankshaft bearings, the valve guides, all had more room to operate. That was intentional. Engineers of that era built tolerance ranges that could accommodate inconsistent oil quality and extended drain intervals because oil technology and manufacturing precision were both more limited. Those older engines were also simpler. No variable valve timing, no direct injection, no turbochargers as standard equipment. A truck from that era with a basic pushrod V8 and 200,000 miles of stretched oil changes might still run because the fundamental design expected some abuse. Modern engines are a different machine entirely. They are engineered with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. They are built that way because tight tolerances reduce internal friction, improve combustion efficiency, and enable the thin viscosity oils like 0W20 and 0W16 that help manufacturers meet federal fuel economy standards. Those tight tolerances function correctly when the oil maintains its full protective properties. Clean oil at the right viscosity sustains a microscopic film between metal surfaces that never actually touch each other. Every moving part in the engine is riding on that film. If the film holds, the engine runs quietly and cleanly for 200,000 miles. If the film breaks down, metal contacts metal, and the wear that follows is permanent. Degraded oil breaks that film in ways that are invisible until it is too late. Motor oil past its service interval does not just turn dark. It undergoes chemical changes. The additive package that provides detergency, anti-wear protection, and the ability to hold combustion byproducts in suspension gets depleted through heat cycling and oxidation. The base oil itself oxidizes and thickens. A 5W30 oil that has been in an engine for 15,000 miles no longer behaves like a 5W30 at cold start. It is thicker, weaker, and slower to reach the components that need it most in the first seconds after the engine fires. Cold start is when the engine produces the most wear because that is when the oil film is thinnest. Degraded oil makes the worst moment of every engine's day even worse. Used oil analysis, the process of sending a sample of used motor oil to a testing laboratory, consistently reveals elevated concentrations of iron, aluminum, copper, and chromium particles in oils that have significantly exceeded their service interval. Those particles are direct physical evidence of metal being removed from engine surfaces on a microscopic level. Each cold start, each hard pull at highway speeds, each hour of stop-and-go traffic removes a fraction of a thousandth of an inch from a bearing surface or a cylinder wall. The engine does not fail from a single event. It fails from thousands of accumulated events that gradually widen the clearances that were once precise. The engine that was tight and quiet becomes an engine that consumes oil, knocks at cold start, and eventually leaves its owner staring at a four-figure repair estimate. Here is the practical decision framework for any driver who wants to stay ahead of these costs. If you own a modern turbocharged engine, which covers the majority of vehicles sold in the last 8 years from every major manufacturer, treat the oil change interval as a hard deadline. Not a suggestion, not a range, a deadline. The turbocharger bearing is the most vulnerable component to oil neglect in your engine, and when it fails, the damage can spread quickly. Use a full synthetic oil that is rated to your manufacturer's specification, and do not go past the interval sticker on your windshield. If you own an older, naturally aspirated engine that does not have a turbocharger or variable valve timing, you have more tolerance than a modern engine, but that tolerance is not unlimited. Change every 5,000 miles with a quality, full synthetic, and you will prevent the sludge buildup that feeds timing chain wear and hydraulic lifter problems. If you have already been stretching your intervals, the right response is not to immediately dump in a cleaning additive. The right response is a standard oil change with a full synthetic, done today. The detergents in a good synthetic will begin cleaning deposits gradually and safely. Stay on schedule from that point forward and the engine will recover most of what it lost from neglect. The cost comparison is not complicated. An oil change runs about $164 at most shops in 2026. A timing chain replacement runs $1,500 to $3,000. A transmission replacement runs $2,500 to $5,000. An engine replacement runs $2,000 to $10,000. Changing oil every 5,000 to 7,500 miles costs roughly $300 to $500 per year. That annual total is less than the cheapest single major repair that oil neglect typically produces, and it is far less than the most expensive ones. An oil change is not routine maintenance. It is the cheapest form of engine insurance that exists, and right now it is protecting you against a repair market that is more expensive than it has ever been. The driver who puts off an oil change is not saving $50. He is borrowing time on an engine that charges interest in the form of repair bills. The timing chain that starts rattling at cold start after 12,000 miles of the same oil is the payment coming due. The turbocharger bearing that fails at 130,000 miles because the feed line slowly filled with varnish is the balance being collected. The mechanic does not care how long you waited. He charges the same labor rate whether you changed your oil every 4,000 miles or every 14,000. The parts cost the same. The hours cost the same. The only number that changes is whether you are paying for a $60 oil change or a $3,000 timing chain. Right now in 2026, with parts prices still moving upward and labor rates at levels that would have seemed unreasonable a decade ago, that gap between the cost of prevention and the cost of repair is wider than it has ever been in the history of the automobile. The engine does not know you changed the oil. It just runs the way it was designed to run. The choice to change it on time is not something the engine rewards you for visibly or immediately. The reward shows up years later at 150,000 miles, when your engine is still quiet and tight while the one across the street is in pieces on a shop floor.